The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
Becker?
Here.
Maloney?
Here.
McCoy? Here. Sitnikow?
Excused.
Shelton?
Here.
Vandenhoevel?
Here.
Warren?
Here. Okay, all 6 board members are present. 1 is excused. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to convene in closed session.
Laura's going to do it.
All right.
Okay. The board will convene in closed session in room 337 pursuant to Wisconsin statute 9.85, parent 1, parent C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility and pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would likely have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such history or data or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, staff investigations. The board will reconvene in open session at 6 p.m. pursuant to section 19.85, parent 2, Wisconsin statute, to consider the balance of the work session agendas, which will include an open forum and reports from staff. The board may reconvene in closed session after the conclusion of the work session meetings for such reasons noted in this posting and pursuant to the proper motion. The board may return to open session to vote on items discussed in closed session.
Second.
Sandy?
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye. Carried 6-0. We'll convene across the hall. And entertain a motion to reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Second.
Sandy?
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
All right, we took roll call at 5 o'clock before we went into closed session, but I'd also like to introduce who else is at the table. To my left, Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, our superintendent. To my far left, Sandy Heller, our board secretary. And to my far right are 2 intercity student council members. And I know Luke wasn't going to be here, but I don't think I have your replacement name. Hannah, sorry.
Where do you go to school, Hannah?
Preble, yeah.
Probably
And
good place.
Michaela Bongse, did I say it right? From West High School. Welcome, Michaela. All right, and then just to let the public know that you can view the board agenda and handouts as well as minutes from past meetings by visiting the district website at www.gbaps.org. Click on Our District at the top and then Board of Education on the left. On that left menu, you will find a link to agendas and minutes. This link will take you to a website called Agenda Manager, where all board agendas, minutes, and handouts from board meetings are housed. Also tonight, the board will provide our community with 2 different opportunities to speak before the board. The first opportunity is during our open forum. The second opportunity is during agenda items where indicated by public comment on the agenda. All speakers must fill out a form indicating their desire to speak. If you wish to speak during tonight's open forum, you may do so with respect to items that are either posted on tonight's agenda or any other matter you wish to share with the board. Please know that Wisconsin's open meeting laws prohibits the board from conducting business on matters brought during this open forum. The board also will permit public comment during agenda items as noted on the board's agenda. During this public participation time, consistent with state and federal laws, board members may engage in dialogue with the speakers. In order that all voices are heard, the board will suspend engagement until all speakers have had a chance to speak. The process for speaking during our agenda items is as follows. The board will first hear the presentation and discuss the agenda item before calling on those who desire to speak. If you want to speak during a specific agenda item, please fill out a form, indicate that on the form, and give it to our board secretary at any point during the meeting. If you desire to speak and haven't yet filled out a form, just indicate that to the board secretary and you can fill out a form afterwards. The board secretary will provide the names of those wishing to speak to the board member conducting that part of the meeting, and you will be called upon to speak at the appropriate time. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes. If your comments are going to be longer than 5 minutes, please submit written comments. Prior to starting your comments, please provide your name and address. So at this time, I have one person indicating a desire to speak, and I'll call up Sarah Pamprin.
Hello, my name is Sarah Pamprin, and I live at 2397 Yolanda Circle, and I am actually here as a representative along with Tom for the Building Anti-Racist Educators Group. To provide a bit of background of who we are and how we came together, we're educators that attended the conference at the YWCA in September 2019, based around the Guide for White Women Who Teach Black Boys, a book by the same name, by Drs. Eddie Moore Jr., Marguerite Pennick Parks, and Allie Michael. We are the educators who at that conference expressed interest in continuing the conversation through a group that the YWCA was going to run beginning in October 2019, facilitated by me. We committed to monthly meetings as well as purchasing 2 books on anti-racist practices and policies. The curriculum that we use is written by Philadelphia teachers, and the name of it is Building Anti-Racist White Educators, though we do not want this to be exclusive to only white teachers. The essential question that the curriculum provided for the month of January was, how can we ensure our schools value Black lives? The Black Lives Matter at School movement started as a one-day event in Seattle in 2016. On this day in that year, thousands of teachers wore Black Lives Matter shirts to school. It has since spread to more than 20 cities and is based on the same policy demands. Number 1, end zero tolerance discipline and implement restorative justice. 2, hire more Black teachers. 3, mandate Black history and ethnic studies in K-12 curriculum. And 4, fund counselors, not cops. Teaching for Change and the Center for Inspired Teaching, 2 Washington, D.C. nonprofits have collaborated to plan for the Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action, which is this week. They recommend teaching lessons based upon the 13 principles of Black Lives Matter: restorative justice, empathy, loving engagement, diversity, globalism, trans-affirming, queer-affirming, collective value, intergenerational, Black families, Black villages, Black women, and unapologetically Black.
All right. We are here to inform you about this week of action and also to share with you that we are intentionally including teaching this week based on the 13 principles of the Black Lives Matter movement. The website blacklivesmatteratschool.com includes many classroom resources as well as ideas on how to participate in this movement. We hope that by next year our entire district will adopt this week of action within our schools and professional learning. The pledge of all involved in the Black Lives Matter at School movement is, as educators and allies, we will work to address the inequities that result from institutionally racist policies and practices in our schools and the communities in which our students live. We do not accept these conditions as they exist, but to accept the responsibility for changing them. We pledge to take actions that will address access and opportunity for all students by highlighting inequities and increasing awareness, organizing for change, and growing the movement. We encourage everyone in this room to also take the pledge at neaedjustice.org/racialjustice. We want to emphasize that although this is something we are trying, it is still in its infant stages, and we are still learning and growing. We acknowledge that whiteness is invasive, and even with those of us that are attempting to do the work, that we misstep. However, we hope that by spreading the word about this week of action, we can build on what we are trying and continue to learn from one another to make schools a place where all students can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak before the board this evening? Seeing none, then we will continue with our agenda. First is our teaching and learning work session. That'll be facilitated by Eric Vandenhoevel.
We have one agenda item on the teaching and learning discussion, and that will be procedures for implementing our district wellness policy. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Joining me at the table are the two co-facilitators for the District Wellness Committee. We're here to give brief background on the committee work thus far and then turn over the draft policy rule language to the board for discussion. Tim?
Good evening, everyone.
Tim?
I don't know. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
The Board of Education showed interest in including recess language within the district wellness policy. Through a series of committee meetings, the District Wellness Committee, made up of representatives from the following groups: parents, students, teachers, administration, school board, nurses, food service department, equity department, student services department, teaching and learning department, facilities department, GBEA, executive director and president, co-curricular department, and the community partners department. Discussed current reality, reviewed best practices, reviewed sample policies, examined state and federal guidelines and statutes, discussed philosophy, and created a recess guiding change document. Through this process, a draft recess language was developed. Upon completion of the first iteration, committee members spent time gathering feedback from stakeholder groups. After gathering feedback, the committee finalized the recommended recess language. And we have submitted that to the board.
So we turn it over to you.
Go ahead, Christina.
Great, thanks, Eric. Thank you for being here. I think this is a great opportunity for our district to showcase how committee work can work alongside the board and with our community to ensure that we build trust, right? And I want to thank the committee, and I serve in the committee, and I will say that in the last meeting I was sick, so I wasn't able to be there, but Vicki and I talked extensively about that last meeting. I was really impressed with the committee that you all pulled together. It's so hard to get that many people into one room, so even just that is a win. But I think the honest conversations that were had at that table, and it's great to see our district continue to be committed to student wellness and well-being, and not just recess, but sort of the broader scope of the whole child. So thank you for your leadership on that. I think as we think about policy and updating policy, you know, it's interesting when we think about practice informing policy and policy informing practice. And I say this a lot, we tend to think of those two things as sort of going in parallel with one another, right? But often one goes in front of the other or so forth, and they sort of inform one another. And what I love about where we are as a district is that we've already been doing a lot of great work, and then thinking about what we need to build into policy to ensure that that great work, no matter who sits here or there, continues into the future years. It's challenging, right, to figure out what we put in there and how we ensure that all voices are heard. So I wanted to start off by saying that. I think that the language that the committee brought forward was fantastic. I think it gets us into a great place, and it demonstrates the time that you all have put into this. One of the things that I did look at whenever I looked at the proposed language, which is in our was in the agenda, was I went back and I actually looked at the specific language for the recess language around. I scored it using the WellSat tool. The WellSat tool is a tool that comes out of the Red Center for Food Policy and Obesity. And it actually, it's a quantitative assessment that scores wellness policy and highlights ways that you can improve and where you're where you're doing really well. So what I did was I went through what you all brought forward. I checked it through the WellSat, and then I tried to identify ways that we may want to consider additional language or adjusting language, not to step on toes and not to say that the committee didn't do the best work, but just based on best practice and federal law, and then also to some of the conversations that I know that the board members have had. Mr. Becker has talked extensively about, punishment for recess, and we've sort of had some philosophical conversations. So what I did, and just so the audience knows, I did bring forward to the board tonight just some pieces for consideration and discussion. Again, this is not to remove or replace language from what the committee brought forward, but rather to say these are some additional options that, based on the WellSat scoring, could strengthen the policy and could also get to some of the comments that the board has talked about at the table. So I just wanted to share that with you all so that you knew my intent of that work. So I'll turn it over back to Eric, and I don't know how you all want to continue to have this conversation, but I'm curious to see what the board thinks about this moving forward. So.
So as somebody who has not been on the wellness committee and sort of just been observing from the back, and then also reflecting on the conversation we had last Thursday with the administrators, with principals, thinking about trust. So we put together a great committee that worked on this and tried to update the policy. And when I got it, I was like, oh, yeah, that looks really good. And then I heard some additional feedback, certainly that Christina provided. I'm like, oh, there's some of that I like, and some that I maybe have questions on. But to me, if this is a dialogue, and I think about the trust aspect. So if the committee puts something together and brings it to the board, and we say yes, and we just, yep, we like that, and we stamp it, and then that's perceived trust. But if we provide any feedback or say, oh, maybe we don't like some of this stuff, now it's, well, you didn't trust the committee. Well, no, it's not that I didn't trust the committee, but now maybe we don't, has anybody thought about this? I'd be curious what the committee would think about some of the language that Christina proposed, and continue that dialogue back and forth. There's I don't think we're under a time crunch when it comes to this, and obviously it's people's time. But I think that part of that trusting relationship is that dialogue back and forth between whoever it is, in this case, the wellness committee and the board, saying, okay, we're working back and forth to try to get to a place that we all feel comfortable. So, like I said, there's some things in your adjustments, Christina, that I think are great, and there are some things that I'd like to hash out. And again, going back to the committee structure in general, I don't think that needs to happen at the board table. So we have 2 hours of wordsmithing. I think we have a structure in place, and it's not that we're sending it back because we distrust. It's because we want the conversation to continue, so that when we pass a policy, we are all, the committee, the community, the board, we all feel it's 100% where it needs to be. It shouldn't be an easy process, but it should be a thorough process to make sure that our policies are exactly what we want them to be. So that's sort of my take. Katie?
I guess I would just, I would wonder, did the committee have a chance to read this? So this was vetted by the committee?
That's a great question, Katie. So what I did a couple weeks ago, Vicki and Andrea and I met. We talked about the drafted policy that the committee brought forward. And then we had a conversation about, and I kind of came forward and I said, I think professionally, because I've been working on wellness policy for the past 5 years, I said I'd like to maybe see if we could get a little bit more defined as to what recess is. And I said, and these are some other ways that we could strengthen it. And so we had that conversation. And then when I talked with Melissa over the weekend, her recommendation was, let's bring this forward to this agenda item and then have a conversation and see what the feedback the board has. So as a committee as a whole, no, because this came after their last meeting, because their recommendations came forward. So
okay, then I guess I would prefer that the committee, who has invested all their time in this, take a look at this, rather than we as a board sit and say, great job, committee, but you should have said this, this, and this, because I don't think that's where we want to go.
But I'm not sure it's fair to send something back to committee that just came from one board person. I think the board as a whole should give some guidelines as to whether we like what's in here, whether we don't, whether we like the theme that's in here, that kind of thing. Because otherwise I think if this is a policy that is a board policy, I think the board should have some input. I mean, I don't know what you think in terms of your committee. I assume they'd like to say, yes, the board as a whole agrees that we would like the committee to relook at X, Y, and Z wherever we decide. Because I'm not sure. I mean, I think that when we have a policy, especially, when we have a policy that's around, especially around recess, and we've had conversations about how we don't want recess withheld as punishment to students and things like that, making sure that is indicated in here sort of sets a value as a board. So this is our value as a board. So some of this I see as communicating that. I have a couple of concerns with some of it because I think it's the cart before the horse, especially related to the high school thing. The last one about providing, here we go. Providing a certain amount of number of recesses of minutes and things like that in our high schools, when I'm not sure we've even looked at to see how that would look, whether that's feasible. And I guess I'm uncomfortable putting something in policy that directs something that we haven't analyzed, and maybe it's been analyzed and I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely, Brenda. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's exactly the intent of some of these pieces, is just simply to say these are additional ways that we could consider language if it feels as though the board and the district, if that's the direction that we want to go. So it's simply a way to open up the dialogue, not as obviously I can't direct anything as one board member. And I think too, again, I pulled a lot of this from the WellSat assessment scorecard, knowing that this tends to be the stronger language. And I thought it would just be good to just have those pieces included. We can always say no. At least that's better than saying, well, we don't know what that even looks like right out of the gate.
Laura?
Yes, I would prefer to have the committee have a crack at this new language. I mean, this committee represents there's a lot of people on this committee. They've done a lot of work, and I wouldn't want them to feel that their work has been circumvented by the board. So I would like them to have another look at this and see if they would like to take on any of this new language.
I guess we should ask the committee.
Andrew?
Okay, so I certainly appreciate the work of the committee, and there's a reason that the suggestions here, of which I'm largely in agreement with Christina, are additions to a small portion of the overall report and a small portion of the overall policy. Okay. This committee is advisory, and if we were to desire as a board to set up a structure similar to city council, where things are actually reported formally in and out of committees that include broader membership than just board members, that is a large change that would need to happen, a large structural change that we just haven't had yet. I guess I'm concerned that, and I don't know how fair it is to the advisory committee either, to act like it's not an advisory committee. And yes, I do think that there need to be some stronger preventions against taking recess away as a punishment. I thought that was a nearly unanimous theme that I had heard in discussions, and then suddenly it's not here. And I'll explain what I mean by it's not here, okay? So it says 3B, 2B, administrators and school staff shall seek alternatives to recess restriction and employ such options in a manner consistent with student needs. Okay. Here's the problem with that. Do I believe that principals are going to have the policy communicate with them? Yes, I do. Do I believe that principals would communicate this policy to staff? Yes, I do. Do I think that the district is providing enough training to all levels, including part-time staff, to make sure right now with the staff development offerings that we have that everyone will get the message about it? Probably not quite yet with regards to some part-time staff. But if administrators and school staff shall seek alternatives to recess restriction, now the problem is you could have one adult acting alone who thinks recess restriction is the way to do things, and if they're ever called out on it, they're going to say, "Oh, I sought alternatives." It's too easy for someone to go against the spirit of this policy and then turn right around and say, "But I did nothing wrong. I sought alternatives. I did nothing wrong. This was the last." And I'm talking about a small number of individuals, less than 1% of individuals in an amazing school district. I don't want a few people to be able to do their own thing under policy language where they can say, "Well, it was a last resort. It was the last resort. The 7-year-old said the D word in the lunchroom." Now, 99% of people wouldn't do that, but the one who did could say, I tried. I sought alternatives, and that's not here. And when we have policy language that is negated in the rules by saying shall seek or shall try, we haven't written policy anymore.
Laura's first. Go ahead, Laura.
So last Thursday, I sat in a room full of principals, and from one of the things I got from that is that they would like us to trust them in their judgment. And I feel like teachers feel the same way. So I'm inclined to let principals and teachers run their classrooms and their schools, and to use their judgment and to trust that they have what's best for children in front of them and that they will do the right thing. They're not perfect people. I'm not a perfect person, but I want them to know that I trust them to handle things like recess.
I think as I sit here and I listen, and we've had a lot of conversation because this is very important. We all want what's best for kids, and we all know that movement is important. And we also know, having sat in the room, Tim came in and met with the parent group to talk about this. And it was very interesting because the approaches from each parent were very different. And I think that the piece that I go back to is thinking about what the expectation is from the Board of Education, because this is a committee that worked very collectively around it, had some really significant discussion, and obviously a whole group of individuals who are working the work each day. One of the things that I keep coming to mind with is that when we put forth rule, what is the message we're trying to, you can't micromanage every particular incident that could come up because we're never going to know what they are. But the reality is, and I've had several discussions, is that the goal, obviously, of recess is to ensure that children have opportunity for access and movement. Yes, and so I look at this and say to the Board of Education, what is not in this policy that will be a positive framing of this conversation that isn't already included? Because that's what you want the charge of the committee to do. I think one of the things that I think that the committee was trying to do, at least where I could read, is not what's not working, but here's the things that are working, a positive lens on it, and what we can do to support that. So from Brenda's point, where the stance and the position of the board is that we want kids to move and we don't want them punished. So how do we make this work? Because as a person who used to serve as principal in the trenches and as a teacher in a classroom, there were times I had some restorative practices and justice I needed to do to support that child's needs, and I needed to talk to him for a minute or two, but that doesn't mean I was punishing, I was helping support. So how do we afford that autonomy with the continued goal of the board, or from what I hear, both from all the conversations I have, that recess, taking recess away should not be a punishment because it's so important for a kid's child well-being. But on the flip side, there are alternative pieces that I hear from parents, from teachers, from others as well. So what is critically important is, from where I sit, is the amount of work that the folks have already done. I would want very clear direction as to what this group was intended to be and do if they take this back, and what the board would be expecting back. Does that sound fair and reasonable? Yeah, because there's been a lot of really good work done, and I don't want to have more work to come back and have more not where we're looking to have it. So anyway.
I'm going to call myself quick. So, Andrew, I appreciate your point about committees being advisory. I don't know how the city council operates, but I do know that if the perception is that we ask committees to do some work and then at the end we just do whatever we want anyway, we're not going to have a very easy time finding people to be on our committees. And then secondly, and maybe this is just a philosophical difference, but if I believe that 99% of the people in our district are good, I want to pass policy that aligns to 99% of our people, and we'll deal with that 1%. You treat people like your best employees and you deal with that 1% when it comes up. Never will we be able to pass policies that will prevent somebody from taking away all the recess. But if that happens, they will be the outlier in our district, and it won't be because you violated board policy. It'll be because we don't believe you're making decisions that are good for kids. So I want our policies to apply to the 99%, not to the 1%.
Okay, our policy, if you know what, I wouldn't say 99 don't need the policy book, but there's probably a solid 90 that don't even need a policy book. Okay. The problem here is that, again, where you have, I guess I'd like to know what changed. I will not allow this to be turned into a trust issue, because this is about the board, the board making. I thought this was a clear theme all year long, that philosophically, taking away recess as a punishment, I thought nobody was there. And if there had been something that said, okay, as a last resort, or something like that, that would be different. But what is if no amendments were made, what's different between this year and next year about recess being taken away as a behavior consequence? If none of the amendments are made, what's different? Is it, if anything, is anything different?
Well, there's new language that says administrators and school staff shall seek alternatives to recess restriction. That's new. That wasn't in last year's policy.
Okay, so board
there's some language that has changed. I'm just pointing out that it's not the same policy.
Oh, I know it's not the same policy, but in practice, I guess I don't understand. I'm interested in what the committee, I'm not uninterested in what the committee had to say, and I'd like to hear what the committee had to say about it, but at the same time, I didn't run for the board I certainly think advisory, I'm glad we're doing more with advisory committees, and having them go deeper into things, and that's important. But if this is going to be a trust issue, if the board is taking almost everything untouched out of that committee and has a couple of amendments and people are upset about it, that's not how this is supposed to work. There can be differences in philosophy where the board might want to take one step further forward or one step less forward on a particular issue, and that's okay. That's how this is supposed to work.
Brenda?
I think it would be helpful because they need some guidance from us. Otherwise, this is gonna be like this for the next 4 months. So, because we could potentially, has been suggested, send this back, but at the end of the day, the committee still doesn't know what's most important to the board. So I would actually propose that I think that the board is interested in making sure that recess is not taken away for minor reasons. I'm wondering if we can ask and I'm speaking for myself, looking for board consensus or not. But if we can ask the committee to go back and see if they can make that language just a little bit stronger, because that seems to be a pretty unified opinion of the board. Is that a fair statement? Okay. Aside from that, are there any other things in this proposed language that Christina has passed out that other board members feel is critical for the committee to take on? Because if there are, we can indicate that. If there aren't, then we can just give this back to the committee and say, do you like it or not? You know, you decide, because the only thing the board that has made a statement about is is making sure that we aren't taking recess away. So that's kind of how I think that we should have the conversation moving forward, to give the committee a little bit more guidance. So that way, when they come back, they've done what we've asked, and we can finish the process.
Christina?
Thank you. I'll try to make this quick. I just want to give, so the board has some context, just so when you're looking at some suggestions of where if you wanted to consider any of this, and also for the wellness committee too, because I think it's important so that there's clarity. The first section, there wasn't anything that was changed. Rather, I included a definition through the CDC, and Dr. Warren, I thought of you with this, with your background on pediatrics, ensuring that we had I felt as though we could consider a more clearly defined definition of what recess is. I thought this was really an important piece to consider because, when we think about recess, and this is to you guys so we can give direction, and obviously so everyone is listening, when we think about recess, I think we traditionally think about it being outside, right? That time where kids go out collectively to outside. And if you actually look at the definition by the CDC, it's really about physical activity opportunities during the school day, where students are encouraged to be physically active, not forced, encouraged, where they are engaging with their peers in an activity of their choice, and it's outside of the traditional learning environment. And I think that definition is important because when we see it as a broader understanding of recess, we realize that there's more opportunities than just the 20 minutes or whatever day it is to actually get physical activity that falls underneath that recess definition. So that was the first part there, and I think it would be interesting to see what your feedback is. The second part at the bottom, under 3A3, where we talk about daily provisions for moderate to vigorous physical activity, I included a line item there under active transport. And this is language, Vicki and I were talking about this today. She's like, do people know what this is? And active transport is just walking and biking programs. So kids are walking to school, they're biking to school. It's a way that we can work in things that we know our students are already doing that strengthens the language, right? That we recognize that that's part of physical activity. So that's this piece. And then under 3B, those were the two other big pieces, again, because I had heard board members talking about the punishment piece, and Vicki and I and Andrew and I had a great conversation about okay, we trust teachers. We know most of the teachers are not taking away recess. They need flexibility. How can we sort of get to a good middle ground where we sort of say, as a district, this is what we value, and teachers need to be trusted and are trusted to do what they need best for their students? And one of the points Vicki brought up was immediate safety. And the example was, if there's a kid on the playground, he's hitting another kid, or in any sort of umbrella of recess, and they're removed, right? Then there's breaking policy. And so we talked about, if you have a broader sense of what recess is defined as, if they need to be removed from the traditional recess, if they're given other opportunities during the school day to just be physically active, you're still adhering to policy, right? we're still doing that. And then the last piece was the minutes. We have also talked as a board about, do we, ensure for elementary and or middle and high that we want to make sure that those minutes are in. And I think it's just a philosophical conversation that, again, I think we can give direction to the wellness team. So I hope that kind of provides some clarity there.
Andrew.
Part of this too is about, what's best for everybody. And I am concerned. It's not, sometimes these decisions about taking recess away are not made by a full-time staff member of this district. And when you take a recess away, when you make when somebody, and when I say you, I don't mean those of you in this room. I say when a person takes recess away, or when a person makes a young child stand at the wall for a whole recess for some kind of non-violent infraction, what you're doing is when that is done to a kid on the playground, that's not doing the teacher or the rest of the students any favors later, because now that kid who didn't, maybe that movement break would have been what kept the kid from escalating later and something really bad happening in the classroom. So if you think this is, and anyone who thinks that this is, Becker saying it's kid gloves for any kind of bad behavior I don't think knows me very well, and certainly hasn't had a conversation with me about what I think of bullying, what I think of taking bullying seriously, including serious consequences. So this is really about what's best for kids. I am concerned. We've never really sent something back to an advisory committee before, at least not this formally, and I'm concerned about setting a precedent that we have a structure where we must clear, or set an expectation that we must clear what we do with an advisory committee. I'm a little concerned about that. And again, part of it is not wanting to be unfair to the committee. There are committee structures where they can make binding edits to things, and that's not what we have here. This isn't, in a state legislative committee, they could make binding edits, and that's different. I also wanted to know did the student members of the committee have anything to say one way or the other about the recess policy?
The student participated in the development, and then when we had the original draft, he sought out feedback from his peers and came back with no changes.
Katie?
You keep referring to this as an advisory committee, but we have our staff here presenting this as a policy for us to take into consideration. So it's not like this was just a fly-by-night group that got together and talked about our wellness policy. People worked very hard and invested a lot of time in this.
When did I ever not say that? You're the one who introduced the term fly-by-night into this, not me.
Talking about things because you were reducing the advisory, you're emphasizing the advisory capacity. I just think that for a committee to work and meet several times come to us with a product, and then at the last minute, as we were first reviewing the product, have changes introduced that the committee didn't take a look at. I think that puts us in a position to have, to consider both products. And quite frankly, I'm fine with the product that they presented. If we didn't want to send it back to the committee, I'm fine with the one that they have presented. And I think our staff could implement this quite handily.
Laura?
We talk a lot about capturing the voices of the public and various stakeholders, and we did that. Everything that you've done tells me we did that. So I still feel like this feels like that work is being circumvented, so it needs to go back to be reviewed. And there's a big difference. It's subtle, but the policy that they recommend says school staff shall seek alternatives. The new language says recess, PE, and other physical activities will not be withheld. That's the difference right there. And so maybe, I like what the committee provided as well, and I feel comfortable with that, and I can vote on that next, when we meet. That's kind of where I am right now.
Okay, yep, go Christine.
I just want to make sure there's clarity. The intention of this is not to circumvent the committee at all. It was just to provide a discussion piece to see if there was additional things that the board wanted to consider. If the board is not happy with any of these, we will vote, and that is fine. That's what it was meant to be, was a discussion, not to circumvent anyone. So I want to make sure that's very clear to the group. It was a discussion starter to see if there was any support behind any of that, and if there's not, then we'll move forward. So,
Christine, if you weren't sick, would you have brought this forward to that last meeting, or?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because I've never been a board member and then serving on a committee, right? And so it was challenging, honestly, for me trying to navigate how I wear multiple hats, right? I mean, this was what I've been doing in my professional career for 5 years. I didn't want to go to the committee and sort of throw my weight around. That feels odd, and I wanted them to, because I value your expertise and the process of how that works. So there was a moment where I was like, okay, I just want it to sort of play out and see what the committee comes forward with. And then I wasn't really sure how that would play, and perhaps maybe I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I was unsure of how to navigate this. And so, right. And so that was my intent, again, is just to say, these are some additional things that we could look at if there's support by the board. If there is not, it is not meant to replace or circumvent anyone's work. So I hope that is clear. Andrew?
Okay, just so there's no misunderstanding, I think the committee did a lot of great work, and whether I think the board should have one amendment or two amendments or three amendments to a multi-page document, I think people also know me well enough to know that if I thought, and I don't remember encountering this ever in 20 years, but if I thought something that came forward from a committee was in complete philosophical opposition to where the board is at, and I thought it was terrible, I would not be shy about saying it. So I will speak for myself. If I think a committee is fly by night or to be disregarded, I will say it, and I won't be shy about it. And that is not what I said here. I think there's a lot of good reasons to not take away recess as a punishment, and I think that I am fearful here that we're at risk that a majority of board members who philosophically feel that way may set this aside in the interest of people's feelings, when, again, like, this divided board stuff, I really hope that people keep in mind that at the end of the day, and I've said this before, when we have this wildly divided infighting board, it's about, what is it about, right? It's about, do we want to greatly reduce taking away recess as a punishment, or very greatly reduce taking away recess as a punishment? To take a more serious example, do we want to significantly increase our support for English language learners, or do we want to greatly significantly? I mean, that's what we fight about. So I hope at the end of the day, at the end of the day, I hope we don't lose sight of that either. There are plenty of districts where you could encounter fights of a much more sinister nature, like, if we just got rid of art, we could save the taxpayer $82 on average. I mean, I hope and pray that will never happen here, but there's places where that probably happened this year. So I just hope there's not a complete loss of perspective here, because the committee maybe wanted to 90% reduce taking away recess as a behavior punishment, and some of the board members want to make it happen 95% less often, and maybe Christina and I want it to happen 100% less often. It's not, and advisory is a technical term though, and if you're going to have an expectation that committees will have essentially a final say, then I think there's structural things that have to happen before you get there.
I'm going to try to put a bow on this. And we do have one person who wants to speak on the topic. So I think that the proposed changes that Christina just gave us are significant enough where I would be curious to hear the feedback from the committee. Personally, I like the modified definition of recess, and I have some mild concerns about the strength of the language, just because I feel like it would put educators in a position to maybe break policy. But I'd like the committee's feedback on that. So if we could, if we can send it back and see what they say, and if they say, nope, we stand by what we provided because this, that, and the other thing, and that comes forward, great. And if they like some of the changes, or they talk about it and they come to us with something different, then that's great too. And if these were just really minor things, or we had some suggestions, we could just do it at the board table, because you're right, it is advisory, and that we have the right to do that. But I feel like this is too significant to be able to say whether I like it or not. So, Michelle?
If I could add to the bowl. As I think about this, the team came forward with the recommendations. So it's, as an advisory or whatever, the responsibility of the administrative team is always to bring forward recommendations to the board. The board certainly always has the opportunity to provide feedback and ask for more information. I want to go back and make sure that if the committee takes these back, the intention of these additions is to strengthen, would that be the accurate word? So the concern is that while it's correct me if I'm wrong, the concern is that the language in here references it, but the board does not feel that it is strong enough to support the intent or desire of the board to ensure that punishment does not become a problem with recess and conflict with recess. Is that really kind of the high overarching? Okay.
Can I say something? Again, I want to just be clear that I didn't just make up this language. This comes from the Rudd Center for Food Policy and Obesity. So these are suggestions of ways that we can improve and strengthen the policy if we choose to, based on federal law and best practice. That's where this comes from.
And I think overall, my summary of the board is there's some people who love the old one, there's some people who like parts of this new part, and some people who might like all of the new part. So what we need is some more feedback from the committee to say, what do you guys think about this? And so I think that's what we should do.
Does that
Sound okay? What do you guys think about that?
Is that what you need from us? Or is there anything else you need from us at this point? All right.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Go
Yep, I'm gonna. We do have someone who wanted to speak publicly, so I'll call up April Rogalski. Hi, April. Can you push the button that looks like someone's talking?
Side profile.
Side profile.
I have to describe that.
Okay, thanks. Hi, my name is April Rogalski, and I am a special education teacher. 3752 Heron Lane, Green Bay, Wisconsin. I'm a special education teacher at Minoka Hill Alternative School. First of all, I want to thank you for your time this evening, and I'd like to thank my Minoka Hill team who is here tonight supporting this hot topic, as I'd like to say. I am not part of the committee. However, I am part of a community, a school community, where severe aggressive behaviors happen consistently, daily, where staff members are assaulted, but yet we still return to our jobs passionately every day. I have a colleague who was knocked unconsciously 2 years ago, returned the next day. We have very passionate people who do their job every day. Where are you going to find a colleague who comes the next day? With that being said, I'm here to talk about the language. I know there's some discrepancies between committees and board. So again, thank you for your time, and please hear me out on what I have to say. I understand, and I have read research that tells us about recess. I agree with what research indicates about how research provides proven academic, social, and emotional physical benefits. If you know me, I'm one of them. One of the things I tell my students, get outside and play. What's your homework today? Get outside and play. Don't we all reap benefits from physical activity? I also agree that students need to be moving, especially in a culture where students spend more time with their electronics and video games. So is that being monitored at home as well? However, after teaching self-management skills, working through student trauma, defiant behaviors just because I choose to be defiant, and any other social skill issues, using a very responsive classroom approach, students still require external motivators, recess being one of them. Classrooms today are designed with movement breaks, flexible, and alternative seating arrangements. Trust that your teachers know what their students need. I can't sit still. I don't expect my students to sit still. I need a movement break. My students need to move. Tier 3 is the most intense level. The goal is remediation. Let's not use punishment. It's remediation of existing academic, social, or emotional problems and prevention of more severe problems. In addition, some students may have learning gaps so severe that the problem-solving team recommends Tier 3 interventions. You understand that? Our lessons need to be fast-paced with good modeling, followed by very focused guided practice. These lessons are more intense because of the less time we have with our students. Ongoing positive corrective feedback is needed to keep student interest and involvement high. The number one motivating factor for my students is recess. I had a student completed one math problem in 30 minutes. The next day, I said, you need to complete this before we head on out to recess. I didn't tell him what the expectation was. Do you know that student was able to complete 4 pages of his Bridges math? I didn't say you needed to do 10 problems. I didn't say you needed to do 2 pages. He was so motivated, he did the 4 pages of Bridges math. My question to all of you, what motivates you? In reality, we all earn things. What do you earn? Again, students need external motivators. We do as adults. Recess is not a punishment, but used as a remediation and an opportunity for correction, to change and learn. An entire recess is not taken away. It's usually about 20%. It's a significant piece of motivation for all students. We are not denying them the opportunity for physical activity or social time. It's used for motivation and remediation for academics and behavior. Forcing a policy for recess would mean some children would miss out on opportunities for instruction. I know the committee probably has talked about things that take place, and I'm not going to go into all of that. But they need the instruction and remediation and sometimes the love that they get from their students. So please reconsider the language that would best meet our students' needs and give teachers the autonomy they deserve. I invite any of you to come to my classroom and see how effective that is. We need external motivating factors, because when someone's telling you where to go, someone's throwing a pencil at you or a desk at you, they need something external. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. What was your name again?
April Rogalski at Minoka Hill Alternative School.
Thanks, April. Thank you for coming forward. I appreciate that. In your commentary, you talked about, you said at the end, please reconsider the language. Are you saying please reconsider the language that's in the draft that the Wellness Committee brought forward, where it says, is that what you're asking us to reconsider? Yes. Let me just read it out to you, because it says,
oh, go ahead, sorry.
I know, it's tricky. Because this language, what was in here, said administrators and school staff shall seek alternatives to recess restriction and employ such options in a manner consistent with the student needs. Do you want us to reconsider that? No.
I actually like that. We need the alternatives, whatever that looks like, especially at our school. So.
Okay, so don't reconsider that, but you're just saying for the other sample language for consideration, you're just not in favor of that.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I want to make sure I understood you. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Moving forward, what the committee is asking for, that's what I'm in favor of. Okay. We need alternatives. We need flexibility in that decision.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, April. And that concludes my report.
All right. Next is our organizational support work session, and that'll be facilitated by Andrew Becker.
All right, we have one item under business and finance. We have some school finance information about vouchers and per pupil costs.
Thank you.
Mr. Becker, if I could, as Pete comes to the table, the voucher conversation is a conversation that's not new in the state of Wisconsin. And in fact, I just want to remind our public that we've been on a journey with vouchers for many, many years. And having those testifying at the legislature, talking to our legislators about that, getting the understanding out there to our community as well. There have been, I think of the years ago when we stood, I know that board members were out in front of the district office in protest of the vouchers and so forth. There was a time and a place where, and I know Dr. Warren would remember this, I know Ms. Maloney would remember this as part of the board members, Mike Blecka, Mr. Becker, who were there at the time, when in fact Green Bay was considered to be one of the top areas following Racine and Milwaukee that would be a voucher community. Eventually the whole state went statewide, which made the voucher concern much broader than just Green Bay and a few other communities. And so the journey has been long, the work has been hard, and I just didn't want to lose sight of the fact that there's been a lot of effort in this community here in Green Bay and at this board table to convince legislators that the impact of vouchers is not a positive impact on our children and our schools and family in public education. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ross now.
Thank you. Well, if you want to clear the room, just talk about school finance, I guess. Yeah. anyway, one of the goals that I have while I'm here working for us in this district is to make sure that I provide the board with a lot of background on school finance. It happens to be my area of expertise, so that you can develop an outward-looking focus with respect to the mission that you have with this district, and speaking on behalf of this district in your outward mission to achieve the best possible school district that you can achieve here. I would say every day I wake up and I'm grounded in the fact that the most important people are children we serve, the teachers and the aides that are in the classroom with those children, and the building principals that make everything work. And so I ground myself in that on a daily basis. So when I do my job, I work hard to try to make sure that they have the resources they need to do what amazing work they do for our children. Am I done? All right, so I'm going to start with this PowerPoint, and it actually is a PowerPoint that I saw at the down at the state convention, and I wanted to talk to the board about vouchers and come up with a way to explain vouchers in a concise way. So while I'm not going to read the PowerPoint to you and I'm going to go through it in a rapid fashion, I would like you to spend some time with that PowerPoint, and if you have any questions at all, please call me, email me, come in and see me. I love talking about these topics, and I'll share the information that I have with anyone that's interested to listen. So I'm going to do a little bit of financial overview in a quick fashion, just to make sure from the last presentation that we've got the basis down, and I'm going to keep going over these things over and over and over again until they're drilled into your head. We've been under revenue limits since 1993. Revenue limits control the spending of the district, and they're set by state statute. So the legislature chooses how much money the public school districts can spend on an annual basis. They do that through the biennial budget process. Revenue limit is about the revenue limit is made up of two pieces primarily. Half of it is local property tax, and half of it comes from the state in terms of aid. And you remember from my last presentation that aid has remained really flat. It hasn't increased with inflation. Revenue limits also have been flat and haven't increased with inflation. And so that, when I went to the state convention, the gentleman, Dan Bush, that was talking about this, he used the pie analogy, saying that all of this is in the piece of the pie. So if one piece of the pie is getting smaller, to fill the pie, the other piece has to be larger, and that happens to be property taxes. So the amount of filling in the pie really comes from those sources. And if you want to have a larger pie, there are ways that a school district can do that. Mostly in terms of having referenda that exceed the revenue cap, or coming up with exemptions that go beyond the revenue limit. What's inside that pie is state aid and property taxes, but what's outside and what's not controlled by the revenue limit is categorical aids, special education aid, transportation aid, school fees, state and federal grants, open enrollment, tuition revenue, things like that are outside of that revenue limit. Critical factors in the revenue limit really are based upon what you have been spending and how many kids that you have. So it's base revenue and it's membership. There are some other critical factors that are involved with the state statute. When a biennial budget is passed, will they allow a revenue limit increase, the state of Wisconsin, or not? So that's another factor that impacts that. Membership really is based on a 3-year rolling average. I like this slide because it kind of shows how that folds into calculating your revenue limit. So let's say, for example, you have declining enrollment in 2017. Your membership for your aid purposes and your revenue limit purposes isn't impacted by that declining enrollment immediately. It's spread over 3 years. So in this scenario, you would average 15, 16 in 2017. say you're declining for 2 years in a row, so still there's a little bit of a mitigating impact because you've got your enrollment from 2016. And finally, the full impact of declining enrollment is felt after 3 years. So it's a way of mitigating that for school districts. And the basic revenue limit calculation is how many children you're serving, what your maximum revenue per member is, and then that equals the revenue that you're able to have in the district without exemptions. Now, how vouchers fit in here is it's part of the exemptions to the limit. The common exemptions to the limit are non-recurring exemptions. These are exemptions that are there just for one time and one time only. Declining enrollment, hold harmless. So if you are a very wealthy district and you don't have a lot of aid coming in, and you're losing equalization aid as time goes on, there's a hold harmless piece that says that you have to get at least 85% of the aid that you received in the previous year. Energy efficiency is another one-time exemption, although recently the state of Wisconsin is phasing out the energy efficiency. We hope that does come back. And then any non-recurring referendum would be a one-time annual referendum. The district does operate with a non-recurring referendum presently. Recurring exemptions are transfer of service, and then if you pass a referendum that goes on, that can make the pie crust larger. Interestingly enough, the vouchers are an example of a non-recurring exemption, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Beginning in the year 2015-16, if you had a voucher student that would go to the Wisconsin program or the Racine program, the state of Wisconsin would reach into your state aid allocation and pull out a certain amount of money to represent the cost of educating those children in a private school. And school boards were allowed to use a non-recurring referendum, a one-time referendum, to retrieve that money so that they were held harmless with respect to the budget process. The problem with that is that that non-recurring referendum then would be over the revenue limit exemption and a direct bill to the property taxpayer. So the real funder of the private school voucher would be the property taxpayer. The top 10 general fund programs by percentage of the share of the state's general fund are listed there for you. So this is, the famous Letterman top 10. K-12 education has the #1 spot at 32%. You remember from our previous presentation that in 2005, the general aid percentage that went to K-12 education was 43%. So it's a dramatic reduction of the general fund in terms of the support for K-12 education. School levy credit, first dollar credit is on the rise, as well as now #9 in terms of the state spending the private school voucher program. General aid overview again, we've got equalization aid, we've got integration aid, and we've got special adjustment aid. The general aid is primarily equalization aid. That's the lifeblood of this district. And integration aid is being phased out. The Chapter 220 aids are almost entirely phased out. And then special adjustment aid just goes to those districts who have declining aid appropriations, and they get the 85% hold harmless. General school aid deductions. So now we're starting to talk about the voucher program for the private schools and the independent charter schools. And here you can see the amount of money that is taken from, in the case of independent charter schools, 416 districts share that responsibility. In the case of independent charter schools, it's only those authorizers that share that cost, so only 13 districts. Milwaukee takes care of the Milwaukee Parental Choice Voucher Program. Wisconsin Parental Choice Program, that's the voucher program that impacts Green Bay. There's 256 districts that are impacted. And the Racine program impacts Racine, and then Special Needs Scholarship Program, which is a newer program, impacts about 84 districts. Again, a pie-shaped piece. State aid, local property tax, there's some categorical aid, federal aid pieces of the pie in there, but again, if state general aid is reduced to a district, I mean, we're not just creating money here. It just doesn't grow up on trees and come out of thin air. Local property tax has to be used to support what is removed from state aid. It's very critical that you understand that. So in 1920, we've got 4 private school programs that operate in the state of Wisconsin: the Milwaukee one, the Racine one, the Wisconsin-wide one, and then the Special Needs Scholarship program. The 3 programs that provide these choice programs and the dates that they were enacted are there for you to read, and the current allocation for these programs is also there for you to read. It's about $8,000 for a K-8 student, almost $9,000 for a 9-12 student. Here's the Milwaukee program and the history, and you can see it's kind of plateaued. It is increasing, but the rate at which it's increasing is dramatically slowed down. This isn't, the slide that you see isn't, you know, 1 year and then the next year and the next year. You see there's large gaps in the years because there wasn't a lot of change in the program at first, but it has plateaued and is pretty even. The Racine program, now you see going year after year after year, so you can see the growth based upon the years that we're looking at is growing and continues to grow. But the one that's growing very quickly is the Wisconsin Parental Choice Program. And as you can see, it's growing at an increasingly rapid rate. Again, remember, these programs take general aid from the districts of those students where they're residents. School boards can tax for the money that's taken through a revenue limit exemption. So the cost of the program is put on the taxpayer, the local tax base. Beginning in the 17-18 school year, enrollment will increase by 1 percentage point every year. If you're a school district and you have kids going into a voucher program, it can increase by 1% a year. Every year that goes up to until the year 2017 or 27, sorry, when there's no limit that is remaining. So it'll be 4% this year, 5% next year, 6%, and so on and so forth. And I do have the statistics for Green Bay coming up. We've not met the full percentage in that program in any one of those years. The reason that I'm showing this slide is I wanted to point out to you that when the Wisconsin voucher program began, the statewide program began, it was actually funded by the state. In the year 2015-16, it became a reduction of your state aid. Prior to that, the state kicked in the dollars. So those children that are in the Wisconsin program in the years 13-14 and 14-15 are still being financed by the state of Wisconsin. So that's why you see the numbers increasing a little bit in terms of the dollars of that program, but you'll see that they decrease. And as those children work through the system, that eventually, the state column will eventually be 0, and the column that is due to local property tax will pay the entire burden. Here's Green Bay. And again, in 2016-17, we had 216 voucher children. In 17-18, 439. In 1920, 823. And the reduction to our general aid was $6,255,684, which the Green Bay School District Board of Education chose to use as a revenue limit exemption so that the state aid and the revenue remained whole.
Just to call on myself for a second for a question on the last slide, if you can just go back. So just to be, oh no, the one you were just on. So go forward one. I guess they both touch on it, but speaking just to Green Bay, some people may look at the amount of voucher and say, well, wait a minute, you have 823 kids going out, but your amount that's reduced is actually less than the cost per student, so you don't have it so bad. So if you could just reiterate, because it is that bad, it's actually and when we met last week, it actually, I knew it was bad, and I learned it was actually worse than I thought. Because those 823 kids, it's not 823 kids necessarily that left our district to go to voucher schools, correct?
Correct.
It might be kids who were never here, and as the program expands and expands, they take the voucher. We needed a certain amount of, they took a voucher without it reducing the number of kids that were taken care of here, so there was no savings and just a loss of revenue, forcing us to charge local. We would have to either subtract it out of our budget with no loss in students, or charge it to the local taxpayer. Those are the only choices the state gives us.
Correct.
And is the number, I know when the voucher program first started, the number was about 78% of the students in the voucher program were not public school students. They'd been in private school the year before. Is that number still consistent, or are you seeing a shift in that?
I did ask Daniel Bush, who gave this presentation, and he wasn't able to confirm or deny that that number has changed, but did say that a number of voucher children had never been in public schools. Yeah. That is true.
And I know it was 78%, 75, 78% for sure the first 2 years, but I haven't heard the number since then. So you're right. So 25% of these students left our district, 75% of the, at least the first 2 years, was not a decrease in our student count.
Just to add, if I could add, I think that's one of our big challenges is we don't know. There's not any transparency around vouchers, so we don't know who those students are or are not. Is that, I mean, that's my takeaway. And I think that's really the challenge. That's one of many challenges around lack of transparency, whether it be around student assessment and how they're doing in schools, how the money's being spent. The voucher schools do not have the same kind of accountability that the public schools do.
All true.
Ring the bell. Being concise.
Yeah. Put the animation slide on next, Lori. This slide I really like because it shows the expansion of the voucher program statewide from 2012 to last year. It doesn't include this year. And, you know, while the district does get to count these children for membership, and we do receive state aid on them the following year, the important thing to remember is that it is a withdrawal of state aid from the pot of money that represents state aid going to all children that are served in public schools. So it's a withdrawal from that pot of money, replaced by money from the local taxpayer. Private and choice schools do get other aids as well from the state, not just the aid transfer from the public school where the children reside, but school lunch aid, breakfast aid, and milk aid, and robotic league participation, as well as other grants that they're now eligible for. And then the special needs scholarship, which is the newest of the programs, started in 16-17, and you can see the amount that is transferred for those children as well. And, you know, we have to replace that aid with, and part of the aid that we're replacing with when the school district goes to the revenue limit override, would include the special needs scholarship program for children. And here's the growth of the special needs scholarship program statewide. I don't think any of these programs, with the exception of the Milwaukee program, have plateaued. I think they're on an upward slope. So here's the summary, and I'd like you to spend some time with the summary when you have some alone time or when you're going through your board documents. It is definitely a reduction of aid. Some districts can replace that aid through revenue limit override. Other districts will just have to take it right out of Fund 10 budget or take it out of fund balance. But the point is that the reduction of aid lost to this district, if it's not replaced by property taxes locally, it doesn't get replaced at all. In other words, if you choose as a board not to revenue for that amount on an annual basis, it's a non-recurring revenue exemption, revenue limit exemption. So if you don't do it 1 year, you lose it forever. So in 15-16, as I said before, that's the watershed year where it was put on the revenue limit exemption and removal of state aids, and school districts could revenue for that through the use of property taxes or the use of fund balance, or reduce their general fund expenditures for the children that they're serving. So those are your three choices. A district may recoup some of the general aid the next year in terms of its position, and you know we're heavily aided, so we'll get about 64% of that back. And you might think, well, then the local property taxpayer isn't really harmed that bad. The problem is remember, the state pool that represents aid is just so big. So if aid is taken away from school districts recoup it by using their property tax base to do that. The following year they get some aid that's still taken from other schools that aren't getting that aid. So pure and simply, if you take this year after year after year, the complete and total cost of the private school voucher is property taxes. And that's the slide I'll leave you with. Any questions?
Questions? Michelle?
Pete, could you talk about what a tax bill looks like, and does it tell the community that they're paying for vouchers?
No, one of the things that we've asked is to have the property tax bill set up so that the voucher payment in any particular school district could be seen by the property taxpayer. It's currently not on there. So what you'll see is the amount of money that goes to schools, the amount of money that goes to the county, the amount of money that goes to the municipal, and the amount of money that goes to the technical college system. And you'll also see the amount of money that is in the property tax levy credit, but you won't have the amount of money that the local taxpayer supports in the voucher system parsed out separately.
But we could, that can be done city by city?
I'm not aware that it can be. I don't know the answer to that.
I think it can be.
Is it city or county?
I think it was the mayor that did it in Racine. Yeah, I think it was the mayor.
And that would make sense for the Racine program because that's Racine specific. So that's housed entirely within the school district and the city of Racine. So it'd be a little more challenging to do on a statewide program, especially if you take a look at the reduction in aid to a school district that has no voucher children. Their aid is still reduced because aid is taken out of that pool that gets distributed to everyone. So how would you account for that in a particular school district, even where there weren't any voucher children? Taxpayers all over the state pay for this program, not just the ones in Green Bay.
Anything else? Laura?
I know we've touched on this the last time you did a presentation for us, but I just want to reiterate that I can't hear too much of this. I know that we're going to need to talk about this a lot more next year, and I feel like there's a steep learning curve for all of us, and things also change fairly rapidly. So I just want to reiterate that I welcome more presentations of this sort so that I can go out into the public and talk about it with some authority. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
And then we have We have no human resource discussion items on the agenda, so then we just have setting future agendas. Any items? Okay, that concludes the report.
All right.
The work session.
To entertain a motion for adjournment.
So,
All in favor? Was there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're adjourned.
I just want you all to note.
I know. And that's why I came tonight, because I figured we would.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.